Today we're going to talk about 4 secrets to success mindset that all Navy SEALs use.
So I am pleased to introduce our speaker for today. I'm very excited to hear what Eric Lundquist has to say to us today. He is Senior Chief SEAL, joined the Navy in 1995 from Bloomington, Minnesota. He graduated Basic Underwater Demolition and SEAL Bud S Class 207 in 1996. He graduated Special Operations Combat Medic Training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and went on to SEAL Team 3. After multiple tours in the Middle East, he went back to Bud S as the leading petty officer of second phase, the dive phase of Bud S. Following his instructor tour, he moved to the East Coast, where he served at multiple commands, including SEAL Team 2. He has deployed multiple times to Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, and other combat locations. He has led large teams in Iraq and Afghanistan, tracking down and capturing or killing Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Iranian terrorist networks, and he has conducted recovery operations for hostages. He has met and been thanked by the President on 2 occasions, and he is now stationed in Minnesota as the Navy SEAL recruiter and happy to be back with his family. Senior Chief Lundquist serves on the steering committee of the Minnesota Military Appreciation Fund, volunteers as a firearms safety instructor for the Department of Natural Resources, and volunteers at other nonprofit events in order to assist veterans. And he's going to tell you a little bit also today about the Minnesota Military Appreciation Fund that's here today with us as well. So please put your hands together and welcome Eric Lundquist.
Thank you. Today I'm going to share 4 secrets to success mindset that maybe you've never heard of. And whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Who knows who said that? Don, don't answer. Henry Ford, that's right. So as Chevy kind of closed in on the market, his Model T market, they had a V6. And they had manufactured this V6 and were advertising it as cheap as or the same price as a V4, so it was a better deal. So I'm going to talk about these 4 secrets. First, I want to thank Dr. Brost's office for connecting me to the chamber. What she's done with a project called The Next Objective, which brings veterans that are redeploying home from combat, reuniting them, and with her efforts, it raised about $50,000 for that project. So I want to give her a round of applause. And Wayzata has come together for Officer Matthews. I just really want to point that out as a community and just thank everyone for that. Next, if you're a veteran, I would like you to please stand up and stay standing. Any police officers or first responders? Okay. I want to give a special thanks to my dad, Dick Lundquist. He's a former Marine and knew when it was the right time to give me tough times so that I could learn the right lessons, and much why I'm standing here today. I don't know that success mindset is genetic, but science is suggesting that it can be learned. So that whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right, is kind of a theme of what I'm going to be talking about today. It permeates what 4 lessons that SEALs use to get through training. So a little bit of history about me. I graduated high school in Bloomington and then went on to a small Bible college north of here in Plymouth. And my father generously paid the first year, and during that time said, hey, look, next year you're on your own. So I had a decision. I was working after school for fun money and food, getting a B average, and knew that there's no way that I was going to work and afford school and maintain an average. So I decided that I had to figure something else out. I read a book about Navy SEALs and I thought that's what I want to do. So I felt like I had a calling and I made a determination to figure it out. So this is a picture of me at graduation, graduating BUDS, which is the 6-month selection training. A point in there, in that training, is Hell Week. And during Hell Week, from Sunday about 9 p.m. to Friday at 1 p.m., we cover about 100 miles on foot, about 150 in the water rowing, about 10 swimming, over 5,000 push-ups, over 4,000 sit-ups, and countless other calisthenics, all on 2.5 hours of sleep. So, needless to say, having the right mindset to get through those difficult times was imperative. Many people go into this training and fail, including Olympic athletes, people that have been in other military services. So it's a difficult thing. Just some cool pictures. I always got to put pictures so people don't fall asleep, so I'm putting this on the front end. Okay. So when I joined, at the time, this is the early 90s, Iraq was kind of a thing, but really communism was still the big thing. And so we were, in 99, basically hijacking Saddam Hussein's illicit cargo coming out of Iraq. And that was really cool. We have a culture that we want to administer justice, and we never fired a shot, so it was sort of boring at the time. It was cool, but we were really at war, which is like playing in a football game instead of sitting on the bench. This is a significant picture because this thing you see on the ground is tubes of plastic explosives. And it's something that, something that made me closest to death in my whole career. The story is, we were in Kenya having to remove part of a reef, and the only way to do it so that they could bring a ferry in was to blow it up. So we had 600 pounds of this stuff, and we wrapped it up, buried it in 15 to 20 feet of water, and it didn't detonate. So we had 600 pounds of explosives that was sitting out in the middle of the ocean, and we had to wait 24 hours, which is a protocol. If something doesn't detonate, you wait 24 hours in case it does while you're trying to mess with it. 24 hours, and then we drew straws to see who's going to go disarm it and rearm it and blow it up. Well, I drew one of the straws. So I'm 15 feet underwater, waves are crashing over me, banging me into the reef, and I'm taking apart this initiating device, and knowing just like at any time it's over, because you're not going to see it or hear it coming. But luckily, I made it out in time, obviously, and that's what it looks like. It's about 200 feet in the air when it finally blew. But through all the things, I really feel like that was the closest I ever came to death. All right, so here's a cool landscape of Afghanistan. We have these outposts where we literally live with the Afghans. It was part of our method of getting to know them, training them so that we can turn it over and leave the country. This is kind of a fun one. We're out in the middle of Afghanistan, it's just men. So what do you think this might be? So you might be wondering, where's number 2? That's a bucket and a trash bag. We would have to engage the villages, and we always had to separate the men and the women because women don't do business in Afghanistan. Well, we had a bunch of the men out, and I was watching this one fella, and this village that we were in was known for this high-level Taliban who would just completely terrorize the village. It's very mob mentality, the way that the Taliban is. And so they just strong arm everybody. The guy wasn't from the village, but I recognized this guy acting funny, so I pulled him out, we fingerprinted him, and it turned out it was the guy we were looking for. So this little 5'4" guy that weighed about 110 pounds was this absolute terror. But as soon as we caught him, you know, he turned into a weasel. And that's a Bloomington Fire Department patch because I graduated from Bloomington. So I was a little symbolic of that and the New York Fire Department. So as we train these guys, they don't have a lot of gear. They're literally wearing refugee gear, and we're cruising through. This is a patrol we did to go to one of these villages and work with basically kind of winning the hearts and minds. It's sort of political. It's sort of recruiting local police officers. So there was this village that had this, he was kind of a financier of military operations for the Taliban, and we caught him 3 times, put him in jail. It's very mob mentality, so they would come in and pay him out and buy his way out of jail. Well, there was one time I went back there to get him again, and he wasn't there. His family's like, no, he's not here. I'm like, well, there's a motorcycle, so he's got to be here. They're like, no, he's not here. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take this. If he wants his motorcycle back, he can come to the base and ask for Eric, and I'll give it to him. Well, obviously he didn't come, so we turned it into a mural, which was fun. The way we painted it on the right there is a Lithuanian Special Forces insignia. We did a lot of work with those guys and took down a lot of people, so that was kind of our trophy, if you will. We like blowing stuff up, so we took all of their explosives. What they do is they combine fertilizer with other elements, so we find bags and bags of this stuff. And so we got rid of it one day. We like toys. This is my bedroom on the left. And an M134 minigun that shoots. Shout out to Polaris, because we have those toys too. They're just north of here. In order for me to do all these operations, I had a huge support network, so we do get some time off every once in a while. On July 4th, I cooked all those people that helped me a steak dinner. So because I had this problem with all these guys going into jail and getting paid out, I had to enlist help from a local guy. And this fellow here, he had been out and on operations with us, started a family, and then kind of withdrew a little bit so that he could tend to his family and some politics. And you talk about complicated politics. Afghanistan politics is insane. But this guy was super aggressive, sort of a U.S. patriot, loved the Western world, wanted democracy for Afghanistan, and helped us out. I had to fire him after about the 7th time. He called me and said, hey, I've got one of your guys. I'm heading to base. He's in the trunk. And a couple of those times, this person wasn't breathing, so I said, look, you got to take him to the jail. I can't do this anymore. So, okay. So secret number 1, goal setting. So, seems simple, but the way we formulate our goals, so the story behind these 4 secrets. When I was at Buds, I took probably 7 or 8 psychology surveys. They're trying, the Navy and the federal government enlisted Stanford's psychology department to figure it out. Like, they spend so much money, we have a huge attrition rate. From the time a recruit reaches me here, it's about less than 1% that make it through. So we spend all this money on trying to figure out how to make more SEALs, and it's not wasted, but the attrition is so huge, so they wanted to try to save money and figure our brains out. Well, they never really figured it out. After about 8 years, they said, look, we don't have a conclusion. The only thing that we know is that the people that are standing at graduation wanted to be there. Because there's no socioeconomic correlation, there's no demographic correlation. They couldn't figure it out. So, but after taking these surveys and years spent, they finally started to ask the veteran SEALs what we did during training to make it through the difficult times. And thus was born these 4 things. So goal setting, what we do is we use this, and I'm going to call it winner language. So one of the first pillars of getting through training is getting over this Hell Week. It's very identifiable in the students. The students that are pre-Hell Week are wearing white t-shirts. Once you graduate Hell Week, you're wearing a brown shirt. So my goal was I will have a brown shirt. And I would repeat that all the time. The candidates that I work with, they have this huge goal of getting through training, and they're not even in the Navy yet. They've sworn in, but they're just working out with me. So we take this huge goal and break it down into chunks. So small sometimes that when you're in Hell Week and you finish breakfast, I just got to get to lunch. That's all I got to think about, because I'm getting sprayed down with with a hose. I'm freezing cold. My buddy's causing me to do these push-ups because he screwed something up on his uniform. Why am I doing this? This is terrible. Okay, so I just got to get to lunch, and that's how the goals are sometimes. So Henry Ford, during this time that he wanted to beat Chevy, what he did was he said, I'm going to one-up you. I got your 6-cylinder. I'm going to make an 8-cylinder. And what it really was a single block cast engine. He could make an 8-cylinder, but he had to put it in 3-4 pieces, and it wasn't cost effective for the assembly line. And if you know anything about Ford, like his assembly lines were part of the revolution of assembly. So he took his premier engineers, segregated them from all the other engineers, and said, create this. They said, it's impossible. He said, well, figure it out. I'll be back in 6 months. So the second secret is visualization. One thing that these engineers did was visualize this thing, and even though it didn't exist, when we visualize things, what our brain does is it starts to activate this thing called a reticular activating system. And what the RAS is something that would help us identify threats if we were ever threatened once by it. But in this world, we're not really threatened, but if you've ever bought a new Mercedes and you're driving around and you go, oh my gosh, that guy's got the same Mercedes. She's got the same Mercedes. Or maybe ladies, you bought a dress and you're like, dang, I see that dress everywhere now. So what that is the RAS. So as we visualize these things and the subconscious mind starts to grasp them and believe in them through the goals, you start to recognize opportunities as they appear. So that's how the visualization works, along with the goals. The third secret is a mantra. And sometimes that's a self-talk, or there's affirmations, or a belief system. So with the example of the brown shirt, my mantra was my goal. I will have a brown shirt. I will have a brown shirt. I will have a brown shirt. And again, that's winter language. I will have a brown shirt. Not I want. I want to graduate Hell Week. If I say I want, my subconscious has a reason for an excuse. So we use this positive language, the winter language. And affirmations, if anyone's in sales, affirmations are a huge reason for our confidence. Your subconscious will actually start to, even if it's not real, believe based on repetitive affirmations in this mantra or self-talk. So Henry Ford goes to his engineers 6 months later, like, hey, we got it figured out yet? No, it's impossible. Figure it out. I'll be back in 6 months. So we've got goal setting with winter language, visualization. I want to touch on one thing. So you probably heard this story about this basketball team. The basketball team was divided into 3 groups. One group, for a week, for an hour a day, they were to shoot free throws. Another group was just to visualize the free throws, but the perfect free throw. And they weren't limited by the real world or a missed shot that affected their confidence. The third group wasn't supposed to think about basketball at all. At the end of the week, they all came back together, shot their free throws. The group that shot the free throws increased by a certain percentage. The group that just visualized, and I've read this 2 different ways, actually shot a better percentage of free throws. The group that didn't think about basketball didn't have any improvement. But the fact that your visualization can actually give you higher production without ever doing anything is proof that our brains have this insane power to overcome what Henry Ford's engineers thought impossible. Third one was mantra. The fourth one is breathing, and this kind of brings it and ties it all in together. So if you listen to Tony Robbins or you listen to some of these motivational speakers, they all talk about a routine, a morning routine or a daily routine. And it sounds like a meditation thing, and for some people that's a little weird. For some groups it's weird, for some groups it's eccentric. Well, the fact is it works. The top 2 killers are heart attack and cancer. The top reasons for those is stress. Well, sitting down for 10 minutes and breathing, 4 seconds, 5 seconds inhale, 4 seconds, 5 seconds exhale, has an extraordinary way of removing stress out of your life. So in our situations, when I'm about to jump out of an airplane, you can't help but take in a deep breath. When I was a kid, crying my eyes out because I didn't want to clean my room, my dad would say, take a deep breath and clean your room. It's weird that we knew this a long time ago, but now the science is telling us how this actually reduces cortisol, which is a stress hormone in your body. So 10 minutes of doing this breathing, visualizing where we want to be, what we want to do, and going over our goals with a self-talk will actually increase our production. For me, what it looked like was with the goals, I had this goal of getting through Hell Week, and then it just progressed in whatever the next hurdle was. And at that time, it was probably some academic test, and then a test in the pool with scuba gear. I'm not a professional speaker, so I'm checking my notes. So Stanford and the federal government spent about $800 grand to figure all this out. There's like a little book on it. As a recruiter, this is something that I'm teaching the candidates. And as I look more and more into big motivational speakers and CEOs of large companies, they're doing this. This is what people that are successful are doing. It's the same thing. It's the success mindset. The funny connection of all this is all they would have had to do is buy a $29 book written by Napoleon Hill in the 1920s. So Andrew Carnegie hired this author to talk to the 500 of the wealthiest people in the United States. These same methods are in that book. And if you know some billionaires, ask them if they used that book. They will probably tell you they did.